So we're back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII. We're talking Rebirth, of course, and we're here to talk about a pretty interesting topic. The new weapon enemy that we've seen a few times in the trailers, and Bizarro Sephiroth, of all things. I just hop right into this. There's people that think there are similarities between the new weapon enemy and Bizarro Sephiroth, and while there are aspects of this that I do disagree with, there are parts of it that actually make sense, and there are parts of it that I actually enjoy. Now, this discussion has popped up a lot with the recent Destined for Rebirth trailer that we got for FF7 Rebirth, particularly because of this shot. I talked about this not too long ago on Twitter a little bit, but it's mostly down to like the camera angle and the giant orb on the front, right? You put these pictures side by side, it's easy to be like, oh, those are quite similar, when in reality, this weapon enemy doesn't look like Bizarro Sephiroth at all. First and foremost, Bizarro Sephiroth is very demonic looking, for lack of a better term, I suppose. You fight it in essentially hell, right? The middle of the planet. It has horns and wings. It's kind of like an opposite of Sephiroth to some degree, who is obviously quite angelic. And to me, when it comes to the new weapon enemy, at least with that initial trailer we got, it looked very amphibious. For one, it doesn't look that big from this particular camera angle, but according to the Destined for Rebirth trailer, it is quite big. But it doesn't look like either of the Sephiroth boss fight forms. It looks like it's completely own thing. Talk about this and point out how they don't look alike. I've had people try to argue that Bizarro Sephiroth also looks like amphibious or aquatic as well, which I've never heard before in my 20 plus years of being an FF7 fan, through all the playthroughs that I've watched and the theories that I've read and watched and all the forums I've been on and so on and so forth. I've never heard anybody say that Bizarro Sephiroth looks like an aquatic kind of enemy. He looks absolutely demonic. I think that's people reaching to try to make their theories make sense. So right here we can do some more kind of like side-by-side picture of Bizarro Sephiroth with all the kind of different angles that we have of this enemy. And again, there are similarities, right? With the particular angle we have from the Destined for Rebirth trailer, the orb on the front, that looks kind of similar. In the bottom right picture, we have what could potentially be horns on the enemy. It's kind of hard to say. For me, whenever I slow this shot down from the release date announced trailer, it looks like those what could potentially be horns are coming off of the back of the creature. But again, we don't have a perfect angle, so it's kind of hard to say. Like kind of another side-by-side with these two particular images. They don't exactly add up because the orb that's on the weapon enemy, which is potentially a Materia, some people theorize potentially a huge Materia, that's maybe a discussion for a different video. It's kind of in its chest, right? It's pretty much parallel with the arms, the shoulders, whereas if you look at Bizarro Sephiroth, that orb sort of thing is below what would be the abdomen, kind of where the waist is, essentially. If we look at Bizarro Sephiroth from a different angle with some concept art and the different angles we have of this particular weapon enemy, they just don't really add up. You do have like the wings that are on Bizarro Sephiroth that somewhat could potentially be resembling the kind of frilly sort of part of the top right image. Like, I don't know what you call that some fish have. Whatever. They could be something there maybe. But again, I think that's kind of reaching. Also, if we look at this particular concept art of Bizarro Sephiroth, if you look where the orb thing is, it kind of hinges backwards and you have that orange sack. I don't know what it's supposed to be. I don't know what we know about these creatures, what it's supposed to be. I don't know. There's a little bit of Japanese writing all over this, so maybe it's explained somewhere if somebody could translate that shit. People have said that that's what that creature has. If you look at the release date announced trailer, when you see it kind of swimming away from Tifa, you can see what looks like the hinge part, I suppose. But to me, it just looks like a tail. When I see this scene of the weapon enemy swimming away and you get a brief look at its tail, like I don't get the vibe that that's connected to some gigantic sack sort of thing. It just simply looks like a tail. That a big part of this discussion hinges on the orb on its chest, which again is maybe a giant Materia, but it's on its chest, not its abdomen or below the abdomen. When we know that it's a weapon enemy, and all the weapon enemies in OG FF7 have an orb or whatever on their chest, or something similar, except for like Sapphire Weapon. It is a little bit harder to make out the original character models, but you can see that they have the red light on their chest, the red orb on their chest, except for Ultimate Weapon. Theirs like kind of goes inward. It's a little bit interesting. I'm not sure why. But if we use like more modern interpretations of these characters, like their Mobius art or what they look like in Final Fantasy XIV, you can more so make out the red orb or just orbs in general that are kind of all over their body, not just their chest. The point of bringing that up is that there's an orb on that weapon enemy's chest with Rebirth because that's how it's supposed to be. That's how pretty much every weapon enemy in the original FF7 looks. They have that on their chest. Some of them have it elsewhere. If you look to like Diamond Weapon in Kingsglaive, it has like orbs or whatever whenever it opens up its shoulders. And you look at Emerald Weapon, it's got the different colored orbs like green and blue on its shoulders. And it potentially is a big-ass Materia that's on the new weapon enemy. I mean, when you look at Emerald Weapon, he has the green, potentially Materia in its shoulders, and it has an attack called Air Tam Storm, and the Air Tam part of that name is Materia backwards, that it does damage to you based on how much Materia you have on each character. So, like, there's some sort of potential connection with Materia and the weapon enemies. While I have spent the better part of this video, almost 5 minutes now, kind of disagreeing with this and kind of arguing against it, I did say that there are aspects of it that I like and parts of it that can kind of make sense. In the discussion of aspects of it that I do like, I kind of like the idea that this is some sort of like warped kind of weapon creation because of Sephiroth's influence, like him being inside the planet, inside the live stream for like 5 years now, right? And potentially this is a weapon that kind of takes on a similar-ish resemblance to Bizarro Sephiroth and kind of gives us an explanation for where Bizarro Sephiroth comes from. Like, that's something we don't really have, as far as I'm aware, when it comes to any sort of lore for FF7, is where these, other than Sephiroth wanting to become a god, why he takes on those specific forms. And I think there's an interesting idea here if we're getting a weapon enemy that's kind of created because of Sephiroth in some capacity, but also can kind of explain why Sephiroth takes on that specific form once we get to, like, you know, the end of the third game, assuming that we're going to be fighting Safer Sephiroth and Bizarro Sephiroth. It's like a thing that he's seen before, or something that he intentionally created, or maybe just something that he's aware of. For like how this could potentially make sense or why it makes sense. For one, when it comes to Square Enix and the remake project, we know they like to tease the future, how we fought characters essentially from having children. They like to tease, you know, the rest of the compilation and things are going to happen in the second and third game, etc., etc. Hell, I did an entire video about the fucking shape that the Whispers take at the top of the Shinra building. It looks like some of the weapon enemies, but maybe specifically Omega Weapon, who itself like latched onto the top of the Shinra building, or the ruins of the Shinra building. I wouldn't put it past Square Enix to maybe use this new weapon enemy to kind of give a little bit of lore potentially to Bizarro Sephiroth, and maybe we'll get something for Safer Sephiroth too, and kind of tease the future, right? Tease what Bizarro Sephiroth is going to sort of look like a little bit, right? I wouldn't put it past Square Enix, right? Even if this creature to me doesn't look exactly like Bizarro Sephiroth, maybe it's not meant to. Maybe it's just being kind of an allusion to that. Similar to the shape that the Whispers take on the Shinra building right here, right? I'm not saying for sure that it's Omega Weapon, but it's in the same location. It has a similar-ish silhouette. It also could potentially look like Emerald Weapon or Diamond Weapon. They have the kind of broad shoulders looking thing. I think that they're, you know, constantly kind of teasing things in the future of the remake project. Something else that I think is worth mentioning, it's something I kind of forget about until people bring it up, because I just don't keep up with like the Japanese side of stuff when it comes to FF7. But Bizarro Sephiroth's name in Japanese is Rebirth Sephiroth. I think it can also be translated to like Reverse Sephiroth, but I think a majority of people call him Rebirth Sephiroth. And obviously we're stepping into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So again, I wouldn't put it past Square Enix to kind of use this new weapon enemy to sort of allude to the future, to Bizarro Sephiroth, maybe give an explanation for Bizarro Sephiroth, why Sephiroth, you know, potentially takes that specific form, but also because we're going into FF7 Rebirth and his Japanese name is Rebirth Sephiroth. I think it can kind of work. I think there's aspects of it that are still kind of a reach, but, you know, I don't write anything off entirely when it comes to, you know, talking about or discussing anything with these games. And even if they're just the smallest little details, sometimes they can matter. Also, if we're seeing a weapon enemy now, like this early into the FF7 story, long before we actually get them in OG FF7, and it's a brand new weapon enemy, there's going to be a purpose for it, right? There's a reason they're doing this. They're bringing in a new weapon enemy and showing it this early. Maybe this weapon enemy has something to do with Sephiroth. And if you actually want to hop back to that video I talked about earlier with like Omega Weapon and the Shinra building and all that stuff, if you kind of want to combine that video with this newer kind of idea and theory, they can kind of work, because that video is kind of about Sephiroth knowing about Omega Weapon, and that Omega Weapon should activate this time around. Obviously, it didn't exist with OGFF7. That was compilation shit with Dirge of Cerberus. But if you bring the whole compilation together, like, Omega Weapon's always existed, right? And when Meteor's about to destroy the planet, it should want to activate Omega Weapon to like suck up all the live stream and fly off, right? So the idea is kind of that maybe Sephiroth is going to use Omega Weapon this time around, right? Because he wanted to absorb all the power, but he could also just have Omega Weapon absorb all the power, all the live stream, and then just fucking kill Omega Weapon or something and absorb it himself, whatever. That's an idea. But maybe him being in the planet is how he learned about Omega Weapon, and maybe this new weapon enemy is something that he created or came across or something along those lines, right? They can kind of work. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting to talk about. But of course, pass off to you guys. What are your thoughts? What do you think about this idea that this new weapon enemy is kind of maybe teasing Bizarro Sephiroth? This video is going to be a bit of a late upload. I haven't uploaded this late in quite some time, but I wanted to talk about this today and just couldn't get around to it until a lot later in the day than I wanted to. But here we are. That's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DaveYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect, we spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane, we in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.